Well, good afternoon. AFR is back on your radio. Jay Smith joined here with Jason Price, back to bring you another episode of After Further Review. I got a lot to talk about today, Jason. A lot of new developments in the Ole Miss landscape and across all of sports. How you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Jay. How are you doing, my man?
Dude, I wish for once it would be sunny in Oxford. I feel like this is our third straight week of clouds and rain. I know that the listeners at home can't see it, but it is another soggy day in Oxford, and we're looking right outside the Rebel Radio studios here outside of Bishop Hall, and it's coming down again. So I just want some sun.
I mean, it definitely is a nice change to at least not be cold and rainy. At least it's kind of like in the 60s right now, so it's not the double whammy, but it still doesn't look too pretty outside.
Yeah, for sure. But hey, we got a lot of sports that we want to talk about with you today. But first, we're going to start off the show. We kind of teased this a little bit yesterday. We have a special guest with us. Amanda Jones is joining the show, and she is currently a GA over in Ole Miss Sports Productions. Amanda, thanks so much for being with us.
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Well, look, I guess we'll go ahead and start with the background. Give everyone an overview of how'd you get into it, where'd you get started, and then kind of progress to where you are now.
Yeah, sure. I did my undergrad up at Rutgers. For those who aren't familiar, it's a Big Ten school up in New Jersey, based out of New Brunswick. So right outside of New York City, and I did my undergrad there, and actually got started as a student manager with the women's basketball team. So I was doing that for a little bit, and they asked me to record some games. They needed extra footage. So that's really how I got started with video and footage, and submitted a reel to Ole Miss, actually, of stuff that I've done, and got this GA position, like you said, Jay, and it pretty much has allowed me to continue my education at Ole Miss while working. So it's a great way to get a master's degree and a graduate education while getting some good experience in the field. So right now, what I do at Ole Miss, at OMSP, we cut up a show called The Season, which is on ESPN for every week during football season, and it goes out on YouTube, and it's for all of our sports in Division I athletics, or Ole Miss athletics, and pretty much just to highlight and to give an inside scoop on the facilities, the student athletes, the coaches, and just the program and what it's like here at Ole Miss.
Very cool. So you get a lot of behind the scenes looks. And that was something that Jason and I were kind of quizzing you about before we came on air. What's it like? You travel with a couple different teams, and you're actually assigned specific sports. So a lot of people think that you just kind of cover everything, but that's not actually true.
Yes, absolutely. We have a number of producer directors, as well as a couple GAs in the office, and I mean, so we really split up the sports. Obviously, big ones like football. It's all hands on deck. Football game days are a massive production, but certain things like tennis and golf and our basketballs and everything, we split those up just so each sport gets 2 or 3 hands on it. And so as a GA, I do have my sports assigned in the fall, winter, and spring that I primarily work on, and just we pitch in and help out wherever help is needed. So yeah, like you said, I get to travel. I was lucky enough to go to Mexico back in early November with the women's golf team, and shoot an episode for that. It actually just went out on YouTube last week. So get some really cool experiences, and get to go to practices and workouts and talk with coaches. So a lot of things that people don't necessarily get to see, and that's actually one of the things that we try to highlight in our purpose of doing the show, The Season. They say in the office, to personalize and humanize student athletes and coaches, and that's what we're trying to do, is to give people an inside look. What you could go to a football game, or you can be there in right field at a baseball game, but what are the things that you can't necessarily see from the stands? So we make up coaches, we make up players, we go to pregame meals, we go to practices, just so you can really, see the culture of the program and what it would truly be like. And the goal is, to get high school kids and just kids who are looking to come to Ole Miss and say what, maybe that have never been to Oxford or have never visited campus, say what would it be like to be a student there. That's what we're really trying to push with the show.
So Amanda, coming from Rutgers and coming to Ole Miss from a lower tier Big Ten school to an SEC school, one of the best conferences in the nation, what are the biggest differences that you've been able to spot between the two campuses, and what do you say is your favorite thing about Ole Miss and the athletics department as a whole?
I mean, Jersey girl coming to Mississippi.
Absolutely, Jay. You beat me to it. I mean, that's the biggest difference. Coming from up north, I mean, yeah, it's obviously a huge difference coming from New Jersey down to Mississippi. But just, I mean, the overall atmosphere in athletics specifically is a huge difference. I mean, the Big Ten, you got some great schools. You got Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, Ohio State. I mean, it's big time athletics, and they have some great football programs, great basketball programs. But just the overall fan experience, just in athletics in general. I mean, tailgating at the Grove when I first came here. This is my first year at Ole Miss. So I got here in July, and so I'm still, still going through my first season, my first year at Ole Miss, and that first time I went out to the Grove and saw those people, it was unbelievable. One of the coolest things I've ever seen. So you don't really get that experience up north.
What's it? I just want to interrupt you briefly. What's it like when you're in the Grove and you've got a camera and you've got that credential? I mean, do you just part the Red Sea? Do people just get out of your way, or are you still like all the other plebes who have to kind of elbow their way to wherever they need to be?
Well, let me tell you, we have the Ole Miss Productions shirt with
Sure.
the big crew on the back, and I mean the cameras are hard to miss. You got a huge brick on your shoulder, so people see it from a mile away, and it's so funny because everyone knows the season. The little kids to the old fans. I mean, I've had kids come up to me and ask to put them on the season. So people will spot you, and they'll get out of your way, but they'll compliment the season. I've had people from all kinds of events. I went to a cross country meet in September, and one of the parents came up to me and complimented the season and said how great it was and how she loved watching every episode. So I mean, people, not just Ole Miss fans, but I went out to the Cal game. That was an early morning game. We were out there 8 a.m. at the Grove, and they were Cal fans that were coming up to me and asking me to take a picture with them, and they invited me into their tents and let me shoot their tailgates, and even give you some food and a drink on the way out. I got a breakfast taco from one of them, so they all love the season. I mean, even fans from California love it. So it's definitely an interesting experience.
How many people, talk a little bit about what a season episode for a specific sport entails. So, like, how many different people touch that product? Like, whether it's developing and to storyboard the idea and the concept, and then going into like actually shooting and editing the piece, and the coaches that have to kind of sign off on it. Like, what does that process look like? How long does it take? Because I don't think a lot of people fully appreciate just how many hands are involved with making something that high level of production.
Yeah, absolutely. We have, for football, it's based on a TV schedule, so it's 22 and a half minutes to allot for commercial breaks and everything. And we have a contract with ESPN. It's every Wednesday during football season. So we have a Saturday game, and then that game will be featured in the Wednesday episode the following week. And so for those episodes have to be turned around very quickly. So a lot of hands on those. We have probably 6 or 7 cameras at each football game, especially home games. We get as many cameras in there as we can. And from there, it's just immediately, we come back, dump the footage, and we have it, logged and in the server ready to go. And we start looking through it by, Sunday afternoon, Monday morning. And it's extremely quick. Monday and Tuesday, we have to cut the episode and then send it out to color on Tuesday. And then it's got to be good Wednesday at 6 p.m. It's, we know it has to air and it's got to be done. So football definitely has a lot of hands on it. Everybody in the office kind of takes those 2 days to cut, it's split up between different segments, and everybody's got their segment. Whereas other sports, for golf going out to Mexico, I went out in the fall, shot that, and we had time to set up interviews and interview the golfers, the coaches. We came up with a script, and we get voiceovers and everything for it. And so from there, once the episode is ready to go, we send it out and we show the coaches, the Marcom staff, everybody, they got to check off on it, make sure everything is correct, sort of QC it, as we say, just make sure that it's up to the quality and the standard of Ole Miss Productions, and from there it gets sent out. So could take a month, could be a couple weeks, or in the case of football, you got everybody on deck. It's 2 days and it's out. So.
And this is a question that I think everyone has been wondering, and I definitely have been wondering it. And you mentioned doing the voiceovers, so I gotta ask: the guy who does the voiceovers for the season, is that his regular speaking voice? Does he talk like that on a normal day?
You know what's funny? I don't know that I've ever heard him speak when it was just a natural conversation. He's a third party guy. I've emailed him many times, so I can tell you he emails. You know, his emails sound normal. That sound fine. But yeah, I've only ever gotten his MP3s, and he's only ever doing the voiceover for the season.
You know what's kind of surprising? It's funny though. Actually, this reminds me of the conversation we had last week with Aaron Long when he came on the show. It's a wonder that the university hasn't reached out to someone like Morgan Freeman, who has probably the most iconic voice of all time. Not that the season voice right now isn't spectacular. I mean, it certainly is.
It's
just,
iconic.
It's a funny, you know, it's interesting because I think. I mean, Morgan Freeman's voice is pretty much synonymous with, you know, like just iconic.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. And we know for a fact he's a fan of Ole Miss Sports.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I know, Jay, I don't know if you've ever gone to the Pavilion while he was there. He's been to a couple games this season, and I was not lucky enough to meet him, like Aaron. I know Aaron, you know, got up close and personal with Morgan. However, I've definitely seen him around the Pavilion a couple times, and it's a great atmosphere while he was there. Morgan Freeman night, men's basketball a couple weeks ago versus South Carolina. I mean, it's a great atmosphere. He started the "Are you ready?" chant, and everyone was so into it. So, I think if we had a contact and could reach out to him and get in touch with Morgan Freeman, I'm sure he would
Well,
meet out.
and I guess just to close this conversation, that you know, what are some of the things that you've had to deal with since you've been here? Just challenges, unexpected. Bumps in the road, because I mean, when you're working on something like this long form documentary style piece that has so many moving parts, there's going to always be something that doesn't go quite according to plan, whether it's, you know, you didn't get the shot that you really wanted, or you have to kind of recut some footage. So what's been the biggest hurdle, or the biggest, you know, opportunity for you to kind of learn and progress throughout the whole experience that you've been here at OMSP?
Yeah, I mean, sports is unpredictable. That's, you know, everyone knows that. I think that's always the biggest challenge. We've had, you know, there are some circumstances where it could be that a coach or a player leaves the team, or, you know, and we have to sort of carve a way around that, or even just a big loss. You know, obviously there's a lot of hype going into, especially, you know, football games or baseball games or something. You know, there's a lot of anticipation for a game. How do we promote the team, the athletics program here, when, you know, maybe we're not having a great season, maybe, you know, we lost a big game, something like that. And so I think just sort of learning, there's a lot of marketing and stuff that goes into it, and just like I said, we want to humanize and personalize. That's our biggest goal. You know, not necessarily to come out and say, hey, you know, we're the biggest, baddest football team, or, you know, we're going to go undefeated this year. We're not trying to say that. We're really just trying to show just the people that are here. Because I know a couple minutes ago you asked me what the biggest difference was between, you know, coming from Rutgers and coming down here. And I think I can honestly say, and nothing against Rutgers, but just the culture of the people down here, it's completely different, because there's just the family atmosphere, the welcoming. I mean, you know, coaches just coming up to us and thanking us for what we do. You know, just as video people, we're often in the background. You know, we're not supposed to be seen or heard, type of thing. But just, you know, everyone's been super welcoming and great, and coaches will invite us to their homes and so stuff like that. I mean, that's the biggest difference for me. So that's really what we want to showcase. So regardless of wins, losses, you know, we might have we might have a coach leave, or, you know, a new hire like Lane Kiffin coming in. That's a big thing. We had to sort of figure out, okay, how do we approach this? And so those are the things that I'm definitely learning on a day to day, because you never see these things coming. Sometimes it's out of the blue, sometimes it's expected, but just the unexpectedness of sports is definitely something. It's a constant. So. Got to kind of get used to that. Absolutely.
Well, it's just, you know, we've had, you know, now this is almost the 4th year of doing the show, and I've been fortunate enough to talk to student photographers, you know, people that are on the marketing side of it, and, you know, people like yourself that kind of do the production. I think, you know, you probably are involved in a different type of production than what you're going to see on like like your digital media, like your social media content. I mean, you're still in that same department and you're still working on those kinds of pieces. But I think it's sometimes, hard to fully understand the difference between creating a 20-second clip for basketball on Instagram versus creating that 20-minute season episode, and how all those things are under the same roof but very, very different. So appreciate you coming on and sharing some perspective and some insight with us. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to dive into some Ole Miss sports talk. We got a lot of football to go over, baseball, and we're gonna look at some headlines across the entire sports landscape. That's next, so stick with us. Welcome back to the show. AFR is on your radio. Jay Smith here, joined with Jason Price. We just had Amanda Jones on the show. Great talking to her. Got a really unique, interesting perspective on her role as a graduate assistant over at OMSP. But quickly, before we dive into the other topics that we want to talk about today, if you want to get in, you want to make your voice heard, please reach out to us on any social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at After Review, After Review Show.
After Review
Took
Show.
me 3 times, but I got it right. Or you can call into the Rebel Radio studios, 662-915-6692. Again, that number is 662-915-6692. Or reach out to us on social media. Always love to hear from you. All right, Jason, so a lot to talk about, but we'll begin. We want to begin with football or baseball? What are we feeling?
I think baseball is the most relevant at the moment,
Okay.
so I
Okay.
think we should go ahead and kick it off with a little baseball.
Okay, and Ole Miss baseball won their season opening series this past weekend against number 1 Louisville. Really fascinating that the Rebels are now 5-0 Goodness, I'm having trouble here. They're 5-0 under Mike Bianco now in home series against teams ranked number 1 in the country. They've beaten top-ranked Florida. They took them down in 2012 and 2015. South Carolina in 2011, and Georgia in 2009. So really impressive stuff from Ole Miss. They did drop the initial game on Friday, came back Saturday and Sunday, and I believe they won their Sunday game 7-6.
7-6,
Had a
yep.
4-run 7th inning to
Mhm.
put them over the edge. So an impressive performance. I mean, we talked last week, you had some doubts about Bianco and whether or not he was going to stick around.
I definitely did have some doubts just because of Bianco's production in the past. And like I said last week, that Louisville series was a really big one. Ole Miss was able to back in the series, win the last 2 games. The first game had fans a little worried with Louisville scoring 3 runs in the 9th inning, ending the game 7-2. A lot of people were a little concerned of how the season would look. You also had fans saying, well, it is the number 1 team. We can't expect too much against them. But coming and winning those 2 games after that Friday night blowout was a huge ordeal for Ole Miss sports just in general. And like you said, that Sunday game in the 7th inning, Ole Miss was down 4-3, and they were able to score 4 runs that would almost put the game away. And I did get a little worried, though, because, Jay, we were talking about last time, I said that Ole Miss needs to bring in a psychologist for all of these sports teams, because it seems like every time that they'll have a number 1 team on the ropes, they'll just kind of get some doubts and end up losing the game. And I saw some signs of that in that top of the 9th inning. Whenever Louisville they were down 3, and then they scored 2 runs, and it looked like that they might be able to tie it up, bring it into extra innings, or make Ole Miss hit out of the bottom of the 9th. But Ole Miss was able to get that double play to end out the game and the series and give Ole Miss that win against the number 1 Louisville Cardinals.
Yeah, and another interesting storyline from this game was it was a family reunion of sorts for the Bianco family, because Mike's son Ben is a junior at Louisville. I think he actually got to start. I know he was in the starting lineup on Friday. I don't know if that changed at all as the weekend progressed. But hey, Dad gets bragging rights over Junior. So that was a pretty unique, because he I'm looking here. It says that Ben played 17 games as a freshman in 2018, and he did not play at all in the 2019 season. I'm not sure if that was due to injury, but a cool moment for dad and son.
Yeah, I mean, and it was kind of funny because on Saturday, Ben Bianco was the last out to give Ole Miss the 8-6 win, and on Sunday he was batting in the ninth, and it looked like Ole Miss had one out. Looked like maybe Ole Miss could close it out and get the second out with Bianco, and he had already had a home run that day, so his bat was still kind of hot, and he was able to get a base hit, got a run for Louisville, kept the momentum going. So I was hoping that they could end the game maybe on a double play with Bianco at the plate again, which would just be a little awkward at Thanksgiving for the whole Bianco family. But I think that but closing it out against another batter might be the safest bet for the family as a whole.
But I mean, overall, I think this is a good start to the season for Ole Miss. I mean, yeah, they did drop that one game, but they still were able to win the series. Now, they actually had a game today against Arkansas State, and that has been rained out. It has been moved to the Ole Miss baseball announced on their Twitter page that it's been moved to April 28th at 6:30, I believe, is the start time. So that's a couple months away.
Right, and also that opens up the schedule a little bit for Ole Miss to give more time to focus on Xavier, which is coming this weekend. And if I'm not mistaken, we also have a midweek game tomorrow against Alcorn State.
Yeah, Alcorn State.
So at least they'll have a couple days rest going into that game, and they won't have a truly competitive matchup until they face Coastal Carolina. That will be on February 28th through March 1st. So I think that Ole Miss will have a little time to cool down from that number one matchup against Louisville, and they'll have time to really find themselves as a team because it seemed like they had a lack of confidence in that first game. Even though Ole Miss scored the first run, the offense was definitely not up to Bianco's standards, and they were able to turn the bats on Saturday with Cale Baker, had 2 home runs, which also, if there's any Ole Miss PR people listening, I have a great idea. For the first 500 fans for one of the games, they should all get the Cale Baker mullets. Those should be waiting at the gate for them, and everybody should get some Cale Baker mullets, and we should just sport those bad boys the whole game. I think that would really get the fans involved.
Yeah, for sure. And like you mentioned a little bit earlier, I mean, their first game away from Oxford is going to come February 28th. They're going to play in the Keith LeClaire Classic up in Greenville, North Carolina. You mentioned Coastal. I'm not seeing that on their schedule. I see East Carolina.
East Carolina.
Okay,
East Carolina.
February 29th, because I'm not sure who is hosting this classic. It's definitely is High Point in North Carolina. I think they might be.
I am not the geography guy to ask.
I don't know exactly where High Point is. Yeah, no, they're in High Point, North Carolina. So that must be the host of that tournament. But yeah, Ole Miss has the next 10 days at home and off to a good start. Definitely, always good to see a bounce back on Saturday and Sunday. And when you're playing against stiff competition, number one team in the country, it should bode well. So we'll see how they develop the rest of the year. Turning though to college football for just a minute. Now, there has been some breaking news. I think that either came out this morning or yesterday evening that Charlie Strong has, because he was released by South Florida this past season, he is going to go to Alabama as a defensive assistant. Exactly my thoughts. Exactly my thoughts. It's interesting because Strong joins a pretty long list of former head coaches to now be under the tutelage of Saban. I mean, most notably, Lane Kiffin,
right.
Steve Sarkisian, now Charlie Strong. I think Dan Mullen, was he not at Alabama for a little while?
Dan Mullen was at, I know he was at Florida.
Well, he's at Florida now.
He was at Florida. He was the quarterback's coach whenever Tim Tebow was there.
Right, and then he went to Mississippi State. But between Mississippi State and Florida, was he not at Bama for a year?
I don't believe so. I think he went straight from Mississippi State to Florida.
Okay.
And actually, yeah, that is correct because I was at the game, his homecoming, quote unquote, back to Starkville. And it was not the warmest welcome. I'll go ahead and tell you that.
Well, it's just, it's hard to really predict what kind of impact Strong is going to have on Alabama's defensive unit. It's just, again, the difference in the way that Saban has kind of built his program around. They have a pretty high turnover, especially when it comes to assistants, and you got to expect Strong's not going to be there for that long. He's going to stay maybe 2 to 3 seasons, and then there's going to be a head coaching gig or a defensive coordinator gig. It's almost like it's where former head coaches go to get their chops back,
Right.
And then once they're established and people can they have serious credentials, then they can get back out on I'm a defensive coordinator, or I'm an offensive coordinator, or I'm a head coach again. But I mean, do you think if let's just say Charlie Strong spends a couple years at Alabama, do you think, he was the head coach at Texas.
Right.
That's a big 12 school, big time Big 12 school. Do you think he ever has a chance of landing a job in the SEC?
I think it'll all have to do with how. I think the biggest job that could be open to him. I think that Derek Mason at Vanderbilt has been doing a great job with the program because Vanderbilt was out of the question of SEC play for a long time, just not really contenders at all. I mean, they're not top of the food chain, but they are definitely not just a wash away game like they used to be. So I think that could be a very real possibility if Derek Mason decides to either leave the SEC, go find a better job, or if God be it, use Alabama as a stepping stone, just like Charlie Strong did.
Yeah.
So I think that Vanderbilt might be a real possibility. It kind of just depends on which jobs open up. And I don't see him stepping into a high profile SEC team, say like an Auburn or a bigger contender like that. But I do see if a school were to open up their head coaching position, maybe at Vanderbilt, or if we haven't seen Missouri's coach do anything yet, but you never know. We have experience with coaches being gone in 3 seasons, so it might happen with him as well. So I think that we'll just have to wait and see how the cookie crumbles.
Yeah.
And Charlie Strong, he definitely has a nice resume. And if Alabama does something pretty serious these next 2 or 3 seasons, I think that he could make a name for himself.
You got to think that Bama will be contending for the playoff. Obviously the last season was not what they were, going for, but they had, injuries and it was a lot of other things at play. But still an interesting development, something that I don't necessarily think was expected. Maybe it was kind of under the radar because we've been in the off season now for almost a month, and this is the first that I heard about it until it was announced. So they must have either kept it under wraps pretty well, or this was a pretty recent development. One other football related news topic that I wanted to pick your brain on, Jason, was the ACC yesterday announced that they would back student athletes being allowed a one-time transfer exemption. So they're joining the Big Ten in this, and they're saying that they unanimously concluded that athletes in all sports should be allowed to transfer one time without having to sit out a year of competition. The NCAA rules currently allow a one-time transfer exemption for all athletes in all but 5 sports: football, men's basketball, women's basketball, baseball, and men's ice hockey. So kind of your bigger, for lack of a better term, your money-making sports.
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of this? This is now the second Power 5 conference to endorse this idea. Do you see it taking on the SEC? What do you think because you've got a lot of different conferences saying different things on how they're going to treat transfers.
So is this transfer, is that pertaining to, does it also include those 5 sports that you just named, or does it?
So as of right now, the NCAA allows one-time transfer, meaning you can transfer and not have to sit out a year for every sport except for those 5.
Okay.
And the Big Ten and now the ACC are saying we want it to include every sport. So, your SEC, your Pac-12, and your Big 12, those other 3 Power 5 conferences have not yet made a statement.
I think it's a very interesting conversation topic, just because you have players like Tate Martell, who transferred from Ohio State to Miami. And sometimes the transfers work out, like Baker Mayfield transfer.
Right.
But also in situations like Tate Martell, you never really know if you're actually going to get that starting position. And transferring might be the best decision for you, and you might figure out that it's not going to work out. So I think that's for the player to decide. I think that it's good that those conferences are opening that up for all of the sports. And I think that if a player thinks that he has a better opportunity somewhere else, he or she, they have a better opportunity somewhere else, then they should go ahead and take it. But if I was the school, I would definitely say, like, you never know what's going to work out. And I mean, and it sounds like a parent giving advice, but that's kind of in the real world situation. You never know if you're actually going to get that starting position, or if you're going to have to wait behind someone else again, or things like that. It's pretty much just if you think that the school that you're going to is not as high profile as the school that you're leaving. So I think that in that case it'll work out, and I think that they should definitely have the choice to choose. And when it comes to the SEC, I don't see the SEC adopting that anytime soon. I think the SEC likes to stay pretty exclusive. I think they like being at the top of at the top and different from everyone else, which I can completely understand when you show that you are the best conference when it comes to football. And right now, before the weekend started, I haven't checked the rankings recently, but there were 6 SEC teams in the top 10 for baseball, and there were 9 SEC teams in the top 25, which really just shows the SEC's dominance in those 2 sports at least. Basketball isn't as strong as the other 2, but when it comes to baseball and football, the SEC shows their power, and I think that will also translate into their decision making, saying that, well, we're different from these conferences. We are. The SEC is a cocky conference. If you go to an SEC school,
and they've certainly, at least on the football front, like, they've earned that reputation, especially through the early, mid, and late 2000s with the dominance in the national titles, and even recently with Alabama, and now LSU. I mean, it's one of those things where I think, if, like you said, depending on where you're transferring to, I mean, there's a lot of schools right now in the ACC that would welcome a transfer, and they'd be like, hey, we need you to play right now, especially football. I mean, I have a feeling that if any of us tried out for some spots at some ACC schools, because they're struggling right now, football. I think right now their football is at almost an all-time low, except for Clemson. But it'll be interesting just because now you've got 2 Power 5 conferences that have sided on one. They're on one side of this issue, and personally, I feel like the only conferences that have a lot of sway are the Big Ten, because of the juggernaut schools like your Penn State, your Ohio State, your Michigans, and your SEC, and then personally, I would say that the third would probably be the ACC, just because of their prominence in men's basketball. I think that while their football is certainly struggling, they still maintain a decent reputation for basketball over the Pac-12, and even more so the Big 12, because the Big 12 recently has had schools that have come close, but they're just not quite there. They haven't broken over that threshold. Now, I mean, yes, look, if Duke and UNC weren't in the ACC, now, I mean, UNC this year's having a rough go at it. Yeah. They're having a rough go. But I still think that because of those schools, they kind of maintain some prominence.
Yeah, I think definitely so. And when it comes to just basketball in general, I definitely expected North Carolina to be a different team this season. And this might be a make or break for Roy Williams. Probably not. I think that he is there for the long haul. But I think that North Carolina has and the ACC as a whole has made them a name for themselves in basketball, most definitely. And I believe that we have a caller at the moment, Jay. If you would like to.
Yeah, I think we do. We're going to go ahead and try and get him on air. Ben, are you with us? Can you hear us?
Hey, Ben Redmeyer, I was wondering if the big win in Louisville this past weekend, which is red, if they want to conquer the baseball team.
So you're asking what does Ole Miss hope to accomplish at the end of the season after the win against Louisville?
Yeah, what does it really mean for the rest of the season? Number one, beat the number one team, what's come out of it?
I think I can answer this one, Ben. I appreciate the call in. I think that Ole Miss, coming off of this number one victory, I believe that confidence is going to skyrocket for the team, even after that Friday night blowout. But I think that Ole Miss, after that win, is looking for an SEC championship at the very least. And now it's finally giving Ole Miss fans confidence that, hey, maybe this might be the year for Ole Miss to head to Omaha again. Hasn't happened since 2014, so this might be the year. Ben, what do you have any thoughts? If you think that Ole Miss is a Omaha team?
I mean, yeah, I can see them definitely competing. I think Louisville been ranked, number one with the sticker 8. I look forward to seeing Hill play that.
Well, I think you have to look at it this way too. We talked about this a little bit earlier from a conference perspective. I mean, you've got Vanderbilt, Georgia, Arkansas, Mississippi State, Auburn, Florida, LSU, all of those, and A&M. All those schools are ranked above Ole Miss in the top 25. I think Ole Miss came in this week at, are they 18 now?
17.
17
Yeah,
now?
17.
Okay. So, I mean, you've got, like 7 or 8 SEC schools above Ole Miss. And at the beginning of this season, before this series, they might have been looking, from the bottom up and being like, dang, we got stiff competition just within our own conference. But after, Jason mentioned, after this win against, for better or for worse, the team that was ranked number 1, I think that confidence is going to propel them forward. And their schedule for the next week and a half is fairly easy. It's going to take them a while before they have a true road game. So
Right.
I think it's going to do a lot for their confidence.
Nice. That's awesome. Glad to hear it. I
never Jerion Ely was not in the starting lineup for outfielders. He was not the starting center fielder, but he was subbed in. I saw him on the Sunday game. He was also a pinch runner, and John Rice Plumlee also came in Sunday in right field as well. So they are getting some playing time, but the majority of their time is coming from pinch running and trying to use that speed for the bases and getting some runs scored.
Awesome. Well, guys, I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Hey, we really appreciate you calling in. Call back anytime. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks so much, Ben.
All right. Well, managed our first call.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on behind the scenes here, and it was certainly a little bit of a juggling act, but definitely hope to continue to do that.
Right.
Throughout the semester. And again, hey, if you want to get in, listen to the show, call in, give us your thoughts. The number is 662-915-6692. Again, 662-915-6692. So definitely appreciate Ben calling in and quizzing us a little bit about some baseball.
Yeah, and asking for specific players too. I mean, my man must have a roster in front of him.
Hey,
or something.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with putting us on the spot. That's what we're here for. So, we've got a few minutes left on the show. I want to transition now into a couple of things kind of outside of Ole Miss sports. Now, are we doing the prices wrong, prices right today? Do you have some for us?
Yes, I do have.
Okay.
I do have one hot take for you.
All right, let's hear it.
And so this segment right here is called "The Price is Close Enough," and me, Jason Price, will make a hot take, and Jay Smith will let me know if the price is wrong, the price is right, or if the price is just close enough.
All right.
To make it work. So my take for the day is that Breon Tyree will be the SEC Player of the Year for basketball, and there are some contentions with Kerry Blackshear from Florida who was their center. I got to see him play in person whenever Florida came here. Also, Reginald Perry, who plays for Mississippi State, gave Ole Miss a really hard time at home last season. Didn't do too much, but he really carries the load for Mississippi State this season. He's showing a lot of potential. Also, Anthony Edwards, who is the projected #1 pick. He plays for Georgia. Ole Miss was able to shut him down whenever we played at Georgia, but he is just an exceptional talent. When you talk about just one player as a whole, he definitely does enough to be in the talk for the #1 draft spot. And also Ashton Hagans for Kentucky has been in the conversation as well. So I believe out of all those players, Brian Tyree, who has broken his career high 3 times this season, once against LSU, once against South Carolina, and then whenever he stomped Mississippi State with the 40-piece at home, I believe that he definitely made a great statement for himself as being the SEC Player of the Year.
You know, I hopeful optimism, I think is how I would categorize that take, just because I don't know if and it's really, I'm kind of conflicted on these types of awards. I have a lot to say on the Heisman Award anymore and a lot of the awards that you see in college football, and how, in my opinion, they have become team awards. And whether or not you're going to win them is largely dependent on how your team performs. You know, if you have a 12-1 season, you might have a better chance of taking home the Heisman than if your team went 7-5 or 8-4. With that being said, Tyree has had some standout games against some good SEC basketball opponents. I mean, he played well against Kentucky. He played well against LSU, South Carolina, Mississippi State. But his team is sitting there at 13-12. They're 4-8 in the conference. So when you look at, you know, Ole Miss's basketball prominence, it's not high, right? No one is expecting Ole Miss to make a run in the SEC tournament. I think right now they are they in the NIT predicted?
I believe, yeah, I think Ole Miss is predicted in the NIT, but what you were going off of saying for like the Heisman, how it's becoming more of a team award.
Yeah.
I see if Ole Miss continues to go on hot streaks like they did, beating South Carolina, Florida, Mississippi State, I think that they can get to a level where, I mean, in 2016, whenever Lamar Jackson won the Heisman,
Right.
Louisville was only 9-4. And in the SEC, I mean, in the ACC, that's not the best record, just because of the caliber of teams that they play. But I think that if Ole Miss can get a little higher of a win ratio, I think that that is kind of comparable with Brian Tyree carrying the load for the Rebels, because we saw the game on Saturday. There's one thing that he has to get better at. It's definitely free throws.
Yeah.
And I mean, he is the most confident shooter on the court when it comes to behind the arc, when it comes to turnaround jumpers. But when it gets to the line, his confidence just fades away.
Well, he has some good games. I mean, you look at Mississippi State, he was 10 for 11. South Carolina, he was 11 for 13. LSU, 9 for 9. Arkansas, 9 for 10. But then he does have, you know, other games where you're right, there's a little bit of inconsistency there. I don't disagree, which is why I'm a little torn. I don't disagree. He's been dynamic. He's been a great playmaker, and you could argue that a lot of the success the team has had against, you know, more marquee opponents this year is largely in credit to him. I just personally feel like, and it's a shame, I just feel like any more of those kind of awards aren't going to go to a guy on a team that's in the bottom third of the conference.
Yeah.
It's just you know, optics,
Right.
and unfortunately, whether or not you know, he is deserving of it, I think I could, you know, certainly you could make the case that he is. It's just, I think, one of those things where it's probably going to go to a guy on Kentucky, maybe LSU, maybe Auburn or Florida, just the teams that are kind of in that upper tier of your conference. Because again, think about any awards at the end of the season, individual or team, largely those guys that are, you know, for almost any sport, those guys that are in those, finalists. They're going to the award shows. They're on the teams that are in the big bowl games, or they're making the tournament and all that. So it's tough because you have talented guys, but when you look at the body of work, it's harder to make that case.
Yeah, and I mean, I can see the SEC's logic when it comes to that, because if a player was really that good, then their team would be better.
Right.
But in certain situations, I mean, with the Georgia player Anthony Edwards,
Mhm.
he's projected as the number 1 overall pick in the NBA, and Georgia is also in that lower third of the SEC. So I think that the SEC should definitely look more when they're picking the player of the year. I understand that the team's record comes into question, but I think that they should look at it more as, say, like a prospect ranking. And also, I mean, obviously Edwards would be in the conversation, but and that's mainly because of his production in high school and the way that he's kind of meshed with the Georgia team. But I think that Breon Tyree this year has been an animal, scoring at, I think he's averaging at least 24 points. The last time I checked,
I think he's at.
in conference play, that is.
I don't know what he's averaging per game, but still impressive numbers. Still definitely a dynamic playmaker. Impressive numbers, and you're right. Yeah, I think in the future I would like to see those kinds of awards go to guys that are deserving and maybe not necessarily on that big name team or that team that's at the top of the conference. But I personally feel like it's kind of cynical, but I feel like your team has got to be in contention in the postseason for you to have a shot at these awards anymore.
So, Jay, don't break my heart, but are you saying the price is wrong?
It's hopefully optimistic, but I think it's wrong.
Wow.
I just don't think that Tyree's going to get that nod at the end of the season. But hey, I'd love to be wrong about this particular hot take. But that was interesting. I mean, it's possible, but I just don't think it's probable.
Right. I mean, I'll take my losses on the chin. That's how it goes. It just happens like that sometimes, man.
Well, hey, listen, we are about out of time, but we really appreciate you sticking around and listening to this edition of After Further Review. Again, thanks so much to Amanda Jones for coming on and talking to us about her job as a GA over in OMSP. We appreciate Ben calling in.
Yeah, appreciate that, Ben.
We're definitely going to try and incorporate some more call-ins in the future. Again, thanks so much for tuning in. We will see you next time.